Good morning, and thank you to my podcast. I am Peggy van der Plas, and today we have a great guest. We always have great guests, but this one I will be able not to butcher his name. We were laughing about that a second ago. His name is Sean Languedoc, so a French name, so very easy for me to pronounce. Hi, Sean, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much, Peggy, for having me on the show.
Super, super fun to have you. So you are a super seasoned entrepreneur. I think it's your fifth venture. Right now, you're the CEO and founder of Outforce AI. You're going to tell us more, but it's really about, revolutionizing. I don't like to use this term because it's very used, but I think it's true in your case. It's really revolutionizing how the outsourcing experience work for companies. So tell us more about Outforce.
So that's a very nice introduction. And to be clear, we're not an outsourcing agency, nor are we a recruiter or a contracting company. What we do is solve a problem that I had building companies. You spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time talking to agencies that are a waste of time because they don't end up having the right people on the team, even if it's a
Mhm.
referral. And the problem is, the outsourcing is we do outsourcing engineering, or we
Yeah.
help companies get matched with the perfect company to do the outsourcing of engineering or data science that a company needs. And we do that through a huge data set. We have 79,000 companies in our database, which we've tagged based on, the project experience in various domains and the depth of their bench in various tech stacks. So we know that they've got depth of experience and user experience knowledge, so they can hit the ground running with product and they can hit the ground running with tech stack.
Mhm.
But that's just table stakes. The real heavy lift is figuring out who they've got when you're
Yeah.
asking. And that is the biggest problem.
Yeah. Mhm.
I've had agencies that have been referred to me that are great agencies, but they have the wrong people at the right time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not the right agency. And so you end up getting stuck, and the person assigned to the task is usually the head of engineering or a team lead. And that person has very little time to do
Yeah.
research. So little time means little data. Little data to make a big decision is a bad way of
Yeah.
doing decisions.
Yeah.
And so I just decided it's enough is enough. I don't want to go through that experience again. I don't want anyone else to go through that experience again. So really we went through all these agencies, and it started off with just asking really simple questions, reverse engineering the first question, which is
Mhm. Mhm.
where normally a client would say, "Hey, we've got a health tech company. We need to be HIPAA compliant, blah, 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 blah. Do you do health tech?" Oh, yeah, of course we do health tech. Everyone's going to say exactly what you
Yeah.
want to hear
Yeah.
because they take those calls all day. And the truth is, they will scramble to get something put together to match what you need,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
chances are 50 at best that they're going to get a good team together. So starting with 79,000, and so you'd only do that to 4 or 5 companies because you only have time to talk to
Yeah.
them, and how you found them by reference or searching the internet or now ChatGPT, it's still a heavy lift on the due diligence
Yeah.
process. And so we have a really efficient way of doing that heavy lift from a bottom-up approach and showing the data on each of the candidates in each of the companies, and then shortlisting down from, literally 79,000 companies to say 10 that would be suitable and worthy of further investigation, and then five that you'd want to really interview based on you looking through the data. And then we coach both the agency and the company
Mhm.
on what to uh, what to ask and what to look for,
Yeah.
because you
And
really want people who've worked together and you want to see that in an interview.
well,
Because
and you
people, when
want
you have,
them to continue working together because they were happy. But when we first spoke, I really liked the way you approach it because we've all got caught into that. I've gone caught
oh
into
yeah,
that many times where you get the name of an agency, and that can be a tech agency, that can be a marketing agency, that can be any type of agency. You happen to focus on tech, and but the resource that is the right resource is not available. So now suddenly you end up with whoever who might be charming, but who's not the specialist that you thought you would end up with. And your experience is not the same. So that's a great business model.
yeah. I mean, statistically, there's a variety of studies, but we say 39% fail of
Okay.
outsourcing. And that's for many reasons, not necessarily the agency's problem. Sometimes it's communications
Yeah,
gaps,
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all kinds of things. But
But
39%,
4 out of 10. I mean,
yeah, 39% fail. Like you got to
that's a
rewrite. That's a
huge,
waste of time and money,
wow,
right?
yeah,
And then another 20% we add lop onto that as those that have made it through, but they were generally a failure. You'll never go back because it was just
yeah,
hell. And so you
painful,
work through
yeah.
those 3 months, you finally get them on the right path. But boy, if you could have started day one with a team that knew exactly what to do and what how to do it,
Ah.
poof, those are swan songs, and that's what we try and do the matching for.
But it's also the opportunity cost because you're
Oh,
developing, I don't know, new products. So instead of not only, okay, you have to do the rewrite, but it's also the fact that your products might be out 6 months later. So you're
yeah,
it on multiple sides. You're exhausting your team internally, you're exhausting their team, and it's very unpleasant. Again, I've been there, so that's why I was so interested by
yeah.
by your
So yeah,
company.
there's three motivating factors, and one of them what you just described is speed, right?
Yeah,
Today, speed is the most important thing because anybody you get, funded, say $20 million or whatever, you're in the news, suddenly everyone who is adjacent to you can now move into your business because they know there's a market for it. Somebody's done the due diligence and they
yeah,
know that you are onto something. So they're going to move into your space. So your competition is now what was it, in the on you know, your battle card is
yeah,
now moving into your space. So you have to
yeah,
move faster to keep that market share. And building a team, that takes time. So
yeah,
getting the right team in and can build now and then slowly replace that with an outsourcing company, with slowly replace that with your own team if you need to, is just giving you that leap forward. But if you
yeah,
fail at that, then
yeah.
you're on the opposite side of that equation. You've
You lost
lost
the money
three to
and you
six months,
lost the
you've
time.
and the
Yeah.
money. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you mentioned the funding. So I would say your pipeline is mainly mid-sized private equity firms based in the US, and you work
Mhm.
with their portfolio company. Do you want to tell us a bit more about, the clients and how
Yeah.
you work for that?
Yeah, well, you can imagine if you're probably getting 20 emails a day from some outsourcing agency telling you they're going to build whatever you want. You can imagine if you're the CTO of a company that just got $40 million. I mean, it's all noise. It's white noise. And so for us to outreach to that is insane. We'll never get there. So we really rely on word of mouth. And that comes from either venture capital partners or private equity partners and to their portfolio company when the portfolio company needs some help.
Mhm.
And so that's been our best channel is going through those companies. And we found that, venture was really good in 2022, beginning of 2023, but of course
Yeah,
everybody knows that dried up quite a bit in 2023, 24.
yeah,
And so we switched gears into private equity,
yeah,
which has been really good because they've got a much more, I would say, prescriptive approach to their portfolio companies,
yeah.
much more involved, obviously bigger stake and a much tighter deadline for that company to reach the margins, gains, or growth that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And we're very happy to help them with that and finding the right company to, refactor or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, and that's a very good segue in the question I had for you, which was, the first 100 days, post acquisition or post funding, depending on what type of investment these PE firms do.
Hmm.
So, in your experience, what are really the critical steps? Because in this first 3 months, 3 months and a half, that's when, to your point, competition might come to try to eat your lunch. So what is really key for these firms to do in this first 100 days from a tech perspective, obviously?
Yeah. So, in fact, I just did a podcast with David Rowley from Diversis, who had a really good 100 days analysis. And the takeaways are really first of all, when you're going to due diligence, you'll generally have a thesis about what you're going to do with that company.
Hmm, hmm.
And I would describe private equities into sort of three buckets. First is, we're just growth capital, and we're going to trust the manager to do what it's doing and continue
Yeah,
to do what it's doing. And then we're going to cap out, sell it out. We're buying at a higher multiple because we know it's high growth,
yeah.
but we know we're going to get 10x at the outside of that. That's not our customer. Our customers
The
are the
ideal
roll-up.
scenario.
Yeah, ideal scenario. Yeah,
which
hopefully that
which
works out, right?
which exactly, which rarely works out, but yes, the ideal
Yeah, yeah.
scenario.
And then there's the roll-ups who are aggregating and trying to
Mhm.
get a gooder a better back end technically to support companies. And then there's the fix the broken company scenario.
Yeah,
We like playing with the latter two.
yeah.
And one of the biggest things that you got to do in that first 100 days is when you're as you're approaching the term sheets and the acquisition, you don't really get to really dig in and dive onto who's in the company, who's good, who's going to stay, and whether the thesis is going to work out. You can only do that after. So it's really important to do what he called the swarm and find all the bugs, find out
Yeah.
where are the holes. And what he does is a really good job. He uses the Conway method. So the Conway method, or the Conway principle, is basically that whatever entity you've created is really a product of the people who created it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? You might have heard of Vivian Ming, who's one of the best AI minds in the valley, in the world potentially. And she talks about, AI is only as good as its parents, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
And so he looks not just at what they have today, but he looks at the decision-making process that got them there, because
Hmm.
there's no straight lines. And so he looks for the logic of what got them to there. And if the logic was, I'm not going to take any risks, or I'm firefighting and I prefer to firefight, then he gets a sense of what that
What?
engineering team is going to look
Yeah.
like.
Hmm.
So I think he takes a very anth anthroform anthropologic
Yeah.
method, which is highly it's really, really good. I like his EQ on that. And that gives you insight as to where you can take the company. And then the second step is to decide who's staying and who's not.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the data is pretty radical on when you do buyouts. A significant portion of the senior leadership team will leave.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think by the time it's year three, it's down to about 12.5% of the company is still there in the leadership side.
Yeah.
So you've got to really assess, and the key is not to make that decision too late. So that's a key factor. And then, of course, on just the actual asset itself, deciding whether it is going to be that asset that can scale or whether it needs to be refactored, and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
what you're going to do about that.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where we help come in, where you have an engineer and this often happens in venture, where you've gone from a bootstrap company to a funded company, and your buddy engineer who you started with the company
Yeah.
suddenly is being asked to scale the product,
Yeah.
and that person maybe loves what they built and isn't willing to give up control, which you really need to do when you're going to scale up you become a more staff person than a coder, and you can't firefight. You've got to build something that's going to scale. So I've seen that time and time again,
Yeah.
where you really need to change the mindset of the engineering team and the philosophy of the product
Hmm.
to one that is going to break and scale and
Hmm.
regrow. And you can do that two ways. One is bring an engineering team that can re-architect, knows the domain really well, and can build a new product, and then onboard the existing team to that product, keeping the existing engineering team in the tickets and customer maintenance
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you don't lose any ground. And the other way is to bring in a company that sort of, staff augmentation on the existing team so you can release some engineers to build the new product based on their product knowledge. And it really depends on the composition of that team.
Yeah. So you, and when I say you, the match that you make, they arrive at the
Mm.
swarm level, kind of, to help, I assume,
No, it's
assess all of
post-swarm.
that.
It's really,
Post-swarm. Okay.
yeah, we come in really, we like to come in knowing where they're going and help them with some people we know who are really good at, they've got the pattern recognition on technical audit and team audit. If they don't have that, some companies like Diversis, like Level Equity and Parker Gale, they've got great people who can do that.
Yeah.
But some companies don't have that
That's
asset. So
that.
we can bring
Yeah.
in someone who can really do a really good technical audit.
Yeah.
They've got pattern recognition, they can see the
Yeah.
spots, and then they make recommendations. It might not be the same people who move into the architecture of the new
Yeah.
product,
Yeah.
but we bring in whoever is needed at the time.
Yeah, because in terms of value creation, obviously, well, you need to have that as early as possible because suddenly the return you can get on your company is going to be widely different depending on what the assessment. It's funny what you're talking about because I have my a bit my very my cheat sheet, like so if I look
Okay.
at companies that had a lot of funding, I know there's going to be a lot of waste. If I
Yes.
look, if I look at companies that maybe in the private equity side have been around for 10, 15 years and the CIO/CTO is a co-founders, I know they're not going to have the latest technology because they would have grown with the company and they would not have the expertise. So, there is probably a lot of tech that you need to bring there. So I have also a bit my pattern recognition where I'm like, okay, a
Hmm.
lot of funding, a lot of waste. A CIO founder, there is a problem, So I think
Yes.
we're all looking at things the same way. But what I really like in what you're saying, because I used to be a VC. I invested a lot in the space. And one of the things that was always people were obsessing about is you own your tech staff. You need to have your
Hmm.
CTO, you need to have your staff. And I could never understand that. I was like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think the way you look at it is really this idea that outsourcing can be a strategic asset, which is the way I've always looked at that. Do you want to tell us a bit more about how actually there is a case for not owning your tech staff?
Well, that comes into a different levels of maturity of the business. So
Mm-hmm.
at the proof of concept level, yeah, you don't typically, and when I first started my first company, you had everything was your moat and you had time. Um, and so you would bring in, and I didn't know anything about engineering, so I brought in, a technical expert as my partner and give him a bunch of equity. And then you get a product market, you get into proof of concept, which leads to product market fit. And then, like I said, you might find that person who was throwing things together on Ruby is not going to be the person who
Yeah,
makes it a scalable .NET product and manage a team.
yeah,
So you have a very difficult conversation and you've given that person 30% of the company.
yeah,
Whoa,
yeah,
those are tough conversations. So it's better, in my opinion, to get an agency that is really good at proof of concepts. And now obviously AI can do a lot of that, but get the person who's a user experience expert, the architect expert, the front end, the back end expert, and you get fractional use of all of that in one company,
yeah,
and they are experts in your space, so they can help guide you as to what product to lead with. Then get product market fit. Then bring in your engineering team or your lead engineer and give him or her a lot less equity
yeah.
because you've got something that is
Mm-hmm.
fundable and you've crossed that barrier. Where it comes to growth stage, like I said, I mean, good engineers are employed. Well, today they are. AI is starting to change that, but it's certainly,
Yeah,
anyone
exactly.
who's a really good engineer, anyone's an intermediate or above is not being deployed if they're good. And so you have to hire them out of where they're going. And so to get a pod of 7 together, let's say, is at least a 6 to 9 month project alone, plus another 3 months before everyone's onboarded and really
Yeah,
cross-functional team, right? If you can get that team that has
exactly.
come off a project in your space and plant it in day one, like this is what our value prop is in
Yeah,
3 weeks, we could find that team based on the data we have, and they can hit the ground running. Well, you've got 9 months of productivity gain, and that means more revenue, more product release, faster to market, and continuous leadership.
yeah,
And if you want to, you can slowly replace them, or if it's a project and they get gone, they're gone, they're gone.
yeah,
But that's the point. It's speed. And so I look at it, you've got in outsourcing, you've got three motivators really, generally, price,
yeah,
quality, and speed. So generally you're hiring, some people are doing opportunistically looking at price only. I say it's a trilemma and you can only pick two. And in our case, we don't support companies that are only looking for price. We
yeah,
say,
exactly. Yeah,
because you go for price, you're going to end up rewriting everything.
yeah, yeah.
So go for quality and we'll give you the speed to get the
Mm-hmm,
quality.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely.
and that's who we work with. Yeah.
Well, and for you as well, because working with portfolio companies in private equity, in the private equity world, there is also a lot of cost savings that, these private equity firms usually, I mean, it's a bit less than the 90s, where it was just like cost savings, leverage, and then pass on the baby to someone else. So there is more, I would say, on the innovation front and transformation front. But cost saving is still something that is looked at. But what I like is that you're really looking at outsourcing as again, as a strategic way to go above and beyond, while many people still have in mind the idea of outsourcing to save costs. You're sending things in a cheaper geography, and that's what people still think when they think about outsourcing.
Yeah, a lot of people think outsource India cheap, right? But ask Facebook and Google and all the majors how much they're paying for a graduate from IIT, which is the
Yeah,
Stanford. There's a bunch of them in India. It's 250 grand
yeah,
starting bonus.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So India can be expensive. India can also be low cost but high turnover because people
exactly.
are gaining experience. So there's lots of risks in a cost-based scenario.
Yeah,
What we do is when I'm saying don't think about cost, that's not the case. Obviously think about cost, but don't make that your first criteria. Make the quality of the
yep,
team in the right time zone your first priority.
yeah, hmm
And as well, most very important is what are the communication skills going to be like between you and the vendor, and what's the culture of your company versus the vendor?
yeah, hmm
All those things. Are they follow the leader kind of, do what you're
yeah, yeah,
told
hmm
engineers, or are they holistic thinkers and
yeah,
problem solvers? You really got to look at that, not just the paperwork on projects and quality of engineering. So we really do a lot of culture matching and communications gap matching
yeah. That
to
makes
make sure that
sense.
everything works as well. But yeah, to
So,
going back to cost, after you've selected based on, the short list, you then decide, you negotiate costs,
yeah,
and geography might actually help you. Like sometimes South America can be cheaper, sometimes
hmm
some parts of Eastern Europe,
yeah,
some parts of Eastern Europe could be very expensive too. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's
and it can be local.
obvious. It's obvious that cost is a consideration, but to your point, if
Mhm.
it's the first criteria, you're likely not going to be, unless you're extremely lucky, but you're
Yeah.
not likely to be successful. So one of the things that we see a lot in tech, which is a challenge, is technical debt. And I
Hmm.
assume in this private equity portfolio, we sometimes buy older assets in the hope to transforming them and, reselling at a profit. There is a lot of tech debt. So how do
Mhm.
you kind of address, by not you, but the companies you outsource that to your point, you were saying some of them are like very sharp and they can, see okay, we've seen that before and let's do it like that. So they are less order taker than actually partner in the solution. So that's something you see.
Yeah. Well, and you can combine things. So sometimes we've combined, I've got a whole bunch of what I would call Ocean's 11 teams, little boutiques of, super smart data scientists, data operations, data migration experts, architects, that kind of thing. And they can come in and quickly map out what needs to be done. And then where there's heavy lifting, but you want to reduce costs, you can go to another agency that would work with that. And again, you're matching
Hmm
not only the agency of the architecture, but
Yeah.
also the agency of the DevOps and everything else
Yeah,
with the client. So it's a little more complicated, but it works really well when it
yeah.
works well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, which makes sense. You bring the people who can have the vision, that architecture, the people who execute, like that's a great value. And again, you cannot have these people on staff. So and that's the thing that I keep,
Yeah.
having conversation about. The goal is not, people think, oh, they're gonna hire a genius, but even a genius has to sleep. So that person is not going to be able to look at the architecture and actually do the DevOps at the same time. So I think, and on top of that, your outsourcing talent is going to do it once. When it's technical debt, once the work is done, they're gone.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and what's funny is sometimes obviously AI is the big, it used to be mobile first, now it's AI
Yeah,
first. But and so a lot of people go, well, I've got all this data, I need a data scientist.
yeah.
That's, often not the case,
Uh-huh.
right? They need a data operations person who's going to help them, and then they need a, there are many components to data science, and what a good auditing team will do is, especially on the data side, assess what the company should do, so they're not having a very expensive data scientists twiddling their thumbs with no data to work
Yeah,
with. They can come in and map out what's the hiring plan or what's the contracting plan to execute on your data strategy, and then make it the lowest cost way of doing it, which is
mhm.
bringing in, those people that can do a better job at ETL and figure out how to
Uh,
organize the data.
when you talk about that, it makes me think about my interior designer. So you would say, oh, why would you hire an interior designer to do your home? But my interior designer gave me 5% discount because he has relationship with
Hmm.
all the, furniture provider or whatever. So basically he paid for himself and I don't have
Right.
to do the work, and that's a bit what
Right.
I'm thinking with your company. It pays for itself because
Oh yeah.
technically having the right person in the right seat at the right time and having the
100%.
speed, the cost of, and maybe let's talk about that, your monetization. So how do you get paid?
We get them. So we let the client choose whatever the agency is, but before we engage with the agency, we're kind of like think of us like a real estate broker who, has a mandate to go find you a house or an office
Mhm,
space.
mhm.
You engage with an exclusive relationship, so they're not, there's not a bunch of conflicting arrangements, and then we present great options, and if they choose one, then we help them engage with the contract. We have a really nice. We've been working on this contract for 20 years, so we know how to. It's been through venture capital lawyers and banker lawyers and everybody else, so it's been through the ringer. It's a really bulletproof client, favorable contract, but also fair to the vendors. We help them negotiate the contract. We negotiate down the contract because all these vendors, they're like I said, they're white noise. There's no signal.
Yeah,
We're finally a pathway to a signal and a great match. Because if vendors are being honest with themselves, they would much rather do business with a company they know a lot about in the
exactly,
business
exactly.
because
You
they
want
look like
repeat
heroes.
business, whatever. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you
Rather
don't
than
have
sort of
to.
somebody who's really in marketplaces doing a health application and, feeling like crap because they're not getting it done. So that matching really makes everybody feel good, and the agencies appreciate it. But there's a lot of companies who do a lot of who are specialized in health tech or fintech or
Mhm, mhm,
marketplace or
mhm.
logistics. So we do create a competitive environment among very good contenders,
Yeah.
and we negotiate that price down. We prearrange a markup on that with the client.
Mhm.
We get paid by the client, and then we pay the vendor. And we help the
Oh,
vendor.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, so we don't want to take any money from any vendors. There are platforms where you'll get, a list of agencies.
Which is a big conflict of interest, right?
Totally. It's all
Yeah,
advertised base, and
yeah,
the highest payer gets the
yeah.
highest
I
rankings.
know, I know.
And then you still have to do your own due diligence,
Yeah.
which is, where you fall into trouble. So we've got a really great playbook on how to do due diligence.
Mhm.
And, like I said, the poor senior engineer who's may have done one outsourcing agency deal in their life, maybe
Yeah,
two,
exactly.
is
Yeah,
saddled with this due diligence process, and it's not like hiring an engineer. You've
yeah,
got to really look at the dynamics of everything.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
So that's
so
very
to answer your
helpful.
question, yeah, like your designer, the amount of time we save getting a
Exactly.
team up
Yeah.
in 3 weeks as opposed to 3 months, and reducing the risk
For
from
risk.
greater than
Yeah,
50%,
yeah.
we have a 98% hit rate.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
So,
that's
yeah.
impressive considering that you are saying like around 60% fail, you
Yeah, well,
know?
yeah, I would call them 60% failures, but some people might not. But yeah, give or take
Yeah,
50% fail
yeah,
statistically,
yeah.
98%, and the 2% is really not a fail of the agency. In our early days, we wouldn't catch that sort of hyper sensitive engineer. Like on paper, all the engineers are going to be great, and then they go in a group interview with the client, and then that person who's quieter, you don't realize is also too sensitive to criticism. And when they, somebody criticizes their code in a stand-up or whatever they did, they just
Okay.
can't handle it.
Okay.
That person's not a right fit. So
Yeah.
that's the reason we also look for bench strength in the tech stack. So we know that
If.
that person can be replaced. And
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
the 2 points.
Wow. I was not really sweating around the 98 versus 100, to be
Yeah, yeah,
honest,
yeah.
but I appreciate the explanation. Well, thank you so much, Sean. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to mention to our audience, like whether they are on the agency side, whether they're on the investor side, whether they're on the tech, we have a lot of tech CEO that are, listening or reading the podcasts.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is outsourcing does not necessarily mean offshoring. We have,
Yes, absolutely.
300,
Absolutely.
3,000 in the United States, 300 in Canada, that are great agencies. And just touting my Canadian roots here, Canada has a significant foreign exchange discount against the US
Exactly.
dollar.
Exactly.
And there are tax advantages for innovation, research grants and stuff. So
Yeah.
so it can be very competitive in Canada, and you have no cultural barrier.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, and there's great Midwestern United States companies if you need to be onshore. So that's one thing.
Yeah,
So dispelling the thing. Also,
absolutely.
if you're going out on your own and you don't care about using Outforce AI, that doesn't bother me at all. But go to our website and learn all the tips. So
That's
I'm
good.
about to publish a whole video series on everything that I've learned about outsourcing and give you all the secrets and the playbook and everything, the questions to
Uh,
ask. I'd rather you not waste time on agencies that are a waste of time. And that is
yeah.
exactly why I built it, because I had wasted time
Yeah.
and had some success with outsourcing and some failures. And
Yeah.
there's so many reasons that you can go wrong, so
Yeah.
many ways you can go wrong.
Absolutely.
I'll be happy to share anything, even if you want to talk to me in person and get more information and we don't do business, I'm happy to share as
Mhm.
much information as I can.
That's fabulous. And we'll put obviously in the show notes, like your contact information. But anyone who's listened, I think it's easy to find you at force.ai, Sean Languedoc. Well, Sean, thank you so much. It was very, very enlightening. And I'm sure actually some people who are listening who are going to read and watch the podcast will connect more dots that they might have done before. And I think the
Hmm.
challenge that we might have confused, to your point, outsourcing with offshoring with low quality, what it was
Hmm.
bad experience, maybe the right agency with the wrong people. So I think you brought a lot of light and how it can be transformational for a company to deal with outsourcing. So thank you so much.
If I could add one more thing,
Yes.
in the due diligence process, and this is one of the secret sauces, but it's hard, it takes time and it takes pattern recognition as well, right? But when you're dealing with, you know, just humans, we communicate in different ways, but add cultural and language differences,
Yes.
it can be a big gap. So understanding what those cultural differences mean is fundamental
Yeah.
to having a good outcome. We used to have a neuroscientist on our team whose master's degree was the neuroscience of cultural adoption.
Mm.
And so for example, if somebody comes from a country where, let's say in the Middle East, where everything's negotiable, and you
Yeah.
come and you land in the United States and you go to Walmart and the price is the price, right? So it's an
Yeah.
outcome expectation, and your neuron is hitting a wall now where it's not connecting to
Yeah.
what the outcome expectation is. That creates white noise in the brain, which lowers productivity. So you throw that kind of, cultural differential with a team that hasn't done a lot of work in the United States, um, and they don't understand the mindset of an agile, aggressive, go get 'em
Yeah.
company. Where they may be more of a deferential culture, a
Mm-hmm,
hierarchical culture, where,
hmm.
in Southeast Asia, a lot of the cultures are very hierarchical. So they're taught through life not to challenge
Yeah.
authority, not to
Yeah.
challenge the boss. And so that's why they say yes to a lot of things, even though they may not understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And questions can be looked at, frowned upon. So it's an embarrassment. So knowing those kinds of things is really important to
Yeah.
understanding how to work with that culture. and we can help with that too.
Ah, that's fabulous. Thank you. That's a very, very important point. I've seen that as well in my past life. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so, so much, Sean. And I really enjoyed our conversation. Super interesting.
Thank you very much, Peggy.
Have a good day. Take care.
Take care.